There is your code. All right, that code's going to stay in the upper right-hand corner. And the slide that we're going to wrap up with, you don't need to actually do anything with the Pear Deck on that slide. But I want us to leave off with the last bullet point on this slide, just to kind of remember what we were talking about last time. Luther writes his arguments, nails them to the door of the church. For most people, in most places, that would have been essentially the end of it, except for maybe some local discussion. But because of the printing press and because Luther's arguments were so popular that people would pay money for them, thousands of copies were printed and the news went everywhere. And because Luther's work sold so well, when his opponents from the Catholic Church tried to publish their own counter arguments against him, they were much less successful. Printers just didn't want to take that job because it was less likely to get them money. And what that all boils down to is Luther was winning what's called the war of words. He's winning the public argument that people are reading about. And in this case, winning means more and more people are starting to agree with Luther's Protestant arguments. That was true for what we will now call the common people. Peasants, we already know who peasants are. Townspeople would have had more freedom than peasants. In many cases, more prosperous, have more money, more pleasant jobs than peasants. But they're still not nobles. Right? Even if they have money, they're still commoners. But Luther was also winning over nobles. Especially frequently, he was winning over various German princes or kings within the Holy Roman Empire. And this was important because they protected him. His life was in danger. He had to go into hiding. He was actually kind of whisked away to a castle disguised as a knight and just kept there. And he needed those princes to do things like refuse to enforce Catholic orders about Luther and about people who supported Luther. But Luther's, well, in this case, not really Luther, but the Protestant Reformation that he started had its biggest early convert not in Germany, but outside of Germany, specifically outside of what we call continental Europe, in England, with Henry VIII, who is that guy. Now, you may have heard about Henry VIII, but I want you at this point just to make a guess. Why do you think it would be that the King of England would want to switch from the Catholic to the Protestant side? Okay, don't Google it. Just go with, why do you think a king would switch sides from Catholic to Protestant? What would be some reasons that a king might have for doing something like that? You guys do make sure we give real answers to these. There are no right answers or wrong answers as long as you are giving it a good, honest effort. I'll give it another minute on the clock. Yeah, if yours is not letting you type in, hit refresh. Okay, there were more good answers than the ones that I have starred, but these kind of catch some common or particularly spot-on kind of answers. Okay, so one, maybe he was just like those nobles and German princes who were persuaded by the arguments. Or maybe he knew that his people had been persuaded by Luther's arguments. Maybe some of those things came across the English Channel and started getting reprinted, and so he just wanted to keep on the good side of his people. Maybe the Catholic side was losing the war. So at this point, we haven't got to the war yet. That is a perfectly valid guess, though. I haven't given you any time frame at all. On this one, you might just, again, think the other side was wrong and wants to stay on the right side of the public, so that kind of makes sense. And then we get this final answer, that this is about him wanting to marry and the church not being on his side. All right, so the answer, well, it's not that he agreed with Luther. Matter of fact, he had publicly come out against Martin Luther. And as you're going to learn in today's Ed Puzzle, Henry VIII was pretty well placed to have public and intelligent disagreements with Luther. Henry VIII was not initially supposed to be England's king. Instead, he was trained in theology for the clergy. And so he knows theology. He knows church doctrine, and he had said Luther's arguments aren't right. Specifically, he disagreed with Luther's argument that what you needed to be saved was faith and faith alone, which was one of Luther's key arguments. So it's not that he agreed, or not that he had disagreed. Nope, I was right the first time. Sorry, it is Monday after all. So it's not that he had agreed with Luther, but 17 years after Luther has published his arguments for the first time, Henry VIII has done an about-face, or turned 180 degrees around, and he has denied that the Catholic Church has authority in England. And he's gone a step farther than that. He has made himself the head of a new Church of England, which still exists, called the Anglican Church. And the British monarch, whoever they are, is still the head of the Anglican Church. Looks like that somehow got cut out of the slide, so let me see if that's in your notebooks. Okay. So it'll be okay either way, but made himself the head of a new Church of England. And the reason that he started down this path that was so different from what he had said and done earlier, he wanted a divorce. Now, the answer on the paradigm, no, you were better than close. You were right. It was just a different way of saying it. Right? He wanted to get married to somebody else, but to get married to somebody else, he needed a divorce first, and the Pope would not grant him one. The reason for this seems pretty obvious. Church doctrine was opposed to divorce. But in many, many cases, when church officials or even the Pope wanted to help somebody get out of a marriage, they could get around the prohibition against divorce by saying, whoa, we just found out that these two people are cousins, right? And close cousins. And so we're gonna make that marriage go away. That was an oops, shouldn't have happened in the first place. And it's not like there are actual blood tests or DNA to check these things. You would just say, oh, it's consanguinity. That means sanguinity has to do with blood, and con means shared blood in this case. So there's too much shared blood. We got to get rid of that marriage. So they could do this, but the Pope was not having it and was not going to give Henry VIII his divorce so that he could get married. But he did it, and seemingly just like that, Henry VIII had made England into a Protestant country. It's not quite that simple, though. And you're going to see some of the messiness again in an Ed puzzle about Henry VIII that will be our exit slip today. Sorry, it's not our exit slip today. It will be part of our work tomorrow. I keep saying that you're going to get time for our exit slip to work on Friday's Ed puzzle. That's why I keep mixing them up. So as this seems like we're leaving out a lot of details and just referring to this mess that you're not seeing, we will pull back that curtain tomorrow so you can see more of what's going on in the scandalous life of Henry VIII. But for right now, know that it was not really as simple as it sounds like for a king to just say, oh, new church, right, new Protestant country, because it wasn't. Catholics didn't just disappear in England. And we've got a little map down here. So England is the part in the south of the larger of these two islands. There's still lots of Catholics in England. There are also lots of Catholics in Scotland and in Ireland. So the British Isles are contested territory. And that carries over after Henry VIII has died. His daughter with one of his wives, so another way to put this is one of his daughters from one of his wives, Elizabeth, becomes queen. She is Queen Elizabeth I. She is Protestant. She was just Queen Elizabeth for a really long time, but the Brits recently had Queen Elizabeth II from 1953 to her death. And I'm getting kind of out of order here, but there's a reason for this. What you need to understand, our focus is going to be on Elizabeth I, but she doesn't immediately become queen after her father, Henry VIII, has died. In between them is another queen, Queen Mary I. Elizabeth only becomes queen after her half-sister has died. Now, Mary I is not popular with English Protestants. She is Catholic, and she is referred to as Bloody Mary. Now, as half-sister, as you might have guessed, Henry VIII is her father, but her mother is Catherine of Aragon. And that's a Spanish connection, and that is going to be important. Now, Elizabeth not only becomes queen, but remains queen for roughly 45 years. So that's a long reign for this time period. "30 years into her reign, and 30 years before the 30 Years' War has started," and that's a whole lot of 30s, Spanish forces try to invade Protestant England. So Spain is down here. Spain was a Catholic country, and it was closely tied to the Holy Roman Empire through family connections in the Habsburg family. And there's that Aragon bit. Which, as you can see in this map, I know it's tiny. Right? This is the senior branch of the Habsburg family that's currently controlling Spain, right? Castile, Aragon. And at this point, they're actually the senior branch above the junior Austrian branch of the Habsburg Empire. So Spain, incredibly important at this time. We've got a major action happening. We need to talk about the motivations of the different sides. So for the Spanish, publicly, you're going to tell the rest of Europe that this is, one, if you're talking, especially if you're talking to Catholics, this is to restore rightful Catholic rule in England. Or, right, if you're trying to get the sympathy of more people, you can at least say, hey, what we'd like is to have religious freedom for Catholics in England. And in this time period, that's kind of a big deal. If you don't belong to the right religion within your country, you might be harassed, imprisoned, tortured, executed. This goes on for a long time. In the English Bill of Rights that you will later learn about in government class, you're going to find out that there was a right to bear arms. Sounds shockingly like our Second Amendment, but it was only a right to bear arms if you were a Protestant. So you were Pope Drake last time, right, Drake? Okay, so you're not a pope anymore. You live in England and you can't have guns because you're Catholic. But Drew, and who lives across the street from you in your little town, is Protestant and he gets to have guns. Just as an example of how all of these religious freedom issues can get tied into all kinds of stuff. Privately, remember, private motives are things that don't have to be bad, but they're not the thing that you tell everybody about. Another reason to invade England is to stop their pirates. English pirates, you may have learned about them earlier as the Sea Dogs, were really good at capturing Spanish ships and stealing their gold as they were coming back from the Americas. And then the English were using some of this gold and other things to support the Dutch. And the Dutch are up here. The Dutch were fighting for their independence from Spain. It's causing Spain a lot of headaches. So they want to stop that. On the ulterior side, this is personal. There are good reasons to have a grudge against Elizabeth for becoming queen after Mary I. And I put a question mark here because we don't know for sure. Right? The ulterior motives, again, they're the things that people want to keep secret. And if Wyatt's going to order the invasion of a whole country, he better have a better reason than it's personal. Right? Because Bree is not interested in going to fight and die for it's personal. Right? Maybe for religious freedom, sure, but not because Wyatt has a grudge against the ruler of this other country. Nevertheless, there were good reasons for there to be a grudge. And Mary wasn't just a fellow Catholic. She had married into the Habsburg family. And so she's tied in. This is a family matter. For the English side, let's watch this. I would say there aren't subtitles. There are, in fact, subtitles, but subtitles are only going to help you if you can read Korean. Beyond that, sadly, we don't have other subtitles. So I will crank the volume as loud as we can get it. I don't know, because that's whoever pirated this part of this movie. So that's all I've got. But we're going to go with it. So what you're seeing here, people are going out to light the warning fires to signal that the Spanish fleet is coming to invade. And there is Queen Elizabeth. If she looks a lot like Gwyneth Paltrow, it's just coincidence. I'm just kidding. It's not at all coincidence. This is a movie. It really is Gwyneth Paltrow. Actually, I think, is it Gwyneth Paltrow or is it Kate Blanchett? Can't remember. Doesn't matter. Is it just a name called Elizabeth? That's Kate Blanchett. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with Gwyneth Paltrow on that one. I'm just going to blame it on a Monday. All right. So, did anybody catch that? What did she say England was fighting to protect? Do your best. If you're not sure, go with a guess. What would be a good public motive for England to be fighting for? Right? This has got to be a good reason. You're going to tell all the farmers to get out of the fields and take up weapons to fight against the Spanish. You're going to open up all the prisons and let the prisoners out to go fight against the Spanish. You should have a pretty good public reason. So if you heard it, write down what you heard. If you didn't, make it your best guess. Yeah. Welcome. All right. And this one, I think what this is saying is the right answer. It's because the Spanish don't want religious freedom for the English, right? So she's saying if the Spanish win, we get the Inquisition here, where we will be tortured, maybe even killed for not believing what the Catholics want Protestant English to believe. So that's what this is about. Both sides are publicly claiming to be fighting for religious freedom. So publicly, that's the answer. Religious freedom for England's Protestants. Which means this is a religious conflict. At least partly. Remember, that's the kind of thing we're trying to tease out here. Are conflicts that we have been told are religious conflicts really about religion, or are they about other things? Well, here both sides are telling us it's about religion, but there might also be other reasons. And here you're going to see this sometimes where it's kind of hard to disentangle what might just be kept private versus what somebody is really trying to keep secret. Because this certainly sounds selfish. Right? Elizabeth wants to keep her place as the Queen of England. And if the Spanish take over, I mean, she can count on being thrown out of power. She was viewed as illegitimate, not just as an illegitimate queen, but as not a legitimate daughter of Henry VIII. Because the Catholic Spanish say, look, the Pope didn't grant Henry VIII this divorce. He had no authority to create a new church just so he could get his divorce. So she could expect not only to lose power, but in this time period, if you lose power, you could spend the rest of your life in a very bad dungeon, or you could be killed. And we can't exactly call someone selfish just for wanting to not be horribly punished or killed. And we're going to stop our notes here for today. And in our last 10 minutes or so, your exit slip, I'll put this slide back up here for those of you who need it. But if you'll go back to modules, and that seems to mean waiting a long time for Canvas today. You will see the 4 December exit slip. That is another bookmark assignment to take you back to Friday's Ed Puzzle. Remember, I told you we would get more time in class to work on it. This is that time. This is the last class time we'll have for the exit slip. So if you need to borrow headphones, please do so now and work on this until the end of the hour. And there's that slide again for anybody who still needs it.